Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited for today's webinar and to share more about AI agents. We really appreciate you guys all joining us today. If you have a second, please drop into the chat where you're joining us from. Now, I want to reiterate that this is a safe space for us to experiment. A lot of our attendees probably have never built their first AI agent before, so we're really excited to share that with you. A few housekeeping things before we get started. So first, this recording will be made available after the event. Plus, any of the resources or links we share today will also include in the follow-up email. Now, before we get started, I want everybody to log into Zapier. There is an actual build along portion. So when we get there, I want everyone just to be ready to start building. All right, so first, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. So first, we have Katie Huson. Katie is our Revenue Operations Manager, and I'm Lena, Marketing Operations Manager. Katie and I sit on a centralized RevOps team. So what that means is that all the GTM functions like marketing ops, sales enablement, and analytics, we all sit on one single team. Basically, we try to solve real life business problems with tooling, automation, and AI, and a little bit of magic. So I don't think Katie or I would describe ourselves as super technical. Personally, I am the person on the team who learned how to use webhooks last. And while I'm very comfortable in things like CRMs and marketing automation platforms, I wouldn't consider myself like a super technical person, someone who's super comfortable with code. So all that is to say that if I can learn how to build an agent, so can you. Katie, anything you would add about skill levels here?
I think we're the definition of if we can do it, you can too. I interviewed here 2 years ago, and I told our boss that I didn't even know what AI was, and so here we are. And so it's definitely a doable thing, and I'm excited to teach you guys.
Absolutely. All right, let me just walk through the agenda. So first, I will give a high-level overview of agents and kind of explain how it works. Then Katie is going to go through a live demo, and we'll go through each step together so you can build with us. And then finally, we will wrap up with Q&A. So if you came in late, make sure you're logged into Zapier and you're just ready to go when we get to Katie's section to do the live build. And our teammate is dropping the links in chat. So if you need to sign up for a trial of agents, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so you might be wondering how an agent is different from other AI tools. So let's use ChatGPT as an example here. So prompting with ChatGPT is like having a conversation with a very smart assistant. You can give it different context and it will respond based on what you input. But building with an agent is like hiring an assistant and giving them access to all of your tools. So the agent continuously acts on your behalf based on instructions that you give it. And it doesn't just tell you things, it does things. So it can send out emails, it can update your CRM, pull records or reports, triage tickets, all depending on what you give it access to. So I like to think of it as prompting ChatGPT is like asking for advice, whereas building an agent is assigning it responsibility. Zapier Agents is just one example of an AI agent builder. It can make decisions and take actions to achieve goals that you give it, all without human intervention. So you can use plain natural language, and you can give your agent a role and instructions to do the work for you. If needed, you can jump in to provide feedback. So one of the benefits of using Zapier agents is that we connect with over 7,000 different SaaS apps, each of them with multiple triggers and actions. So think about a minute just the tools that you use for everyday work. For us, it's going to be Slack, Bamboo, Gmail, Coda for documentation, Asana for project management. Zapier's products like agents can connect with all of those apps. So if you're used to using native integrations within your software, you can probably connect your CRM to an email tool. But that's going to be the limit of the actions that you can take. When you build with Zapier, you can connect other tools as well and not be limited just to that end-to-end integration. So let's take a look at an example of how connecting AI to your apps can solve a real people problem. So this is an example of a Zapier HR agent that one of our colleagues, Emily Maybe, put together. So Emily here is creating a custom new hire welcome box curator. So you can see in this screenshot that she's using natural language and Gmail to act as a automatic teammate. But how did she build this? So you'll notice that Emily here has a trigger and then several steps. So this is similar if you have a comfort level setting up Zaps, it's similar to how you would set up a Zap. So you're going to need to ask yourself, what is the trigger? And when the trigger happens, then what steps should happen? The first link is the trigger. So Emily, in this case, is searching through Gmail for a specific subject line because that indicates that there is a new hire. And then for the following steps, for the actions, she is explaining what she needs the agent to do step by step. So first, the agent is going to look through a specific catalog to find items that matches the preferences of the new hire. She's put in some rules here, so the cost of the items have a maximum and only choose items specifically from that collection. Two, search the web, locate these items. And then three, write a custom note to include in the gift box. I'm going to jump back a couple slides just so you can see the full slides again. So you can see on the left side, this is all of her instructions, including the trigger. And then on the right side is when she's testing with the agent. This is the reply that the agent gives you. So when you're setting up the agent, you can give it feedback if it's not pulling things exactly the way that you intended. All right, on to the main portion of our webinar. Katie is going to go ahead and walk us through a demo.
Yeah, okay, let's do this. Just to give a little bit of background on what this process is and why I put it together. Million years ago, I used to work in sales, and one thing I remember is sometimes you have a long deal cycle, or you just don't have a reason to be in touch with your customers all the time. You don't want to just circle back. You don't want to be checking in. You need a purpose if you want to stay in touch. So you can do that really easily through news updates and just keeping track of the company. But that is really time consuming. So what I've got here is a process that allows us to take our target accounts, run them through an agent to find recent news, and then draft emails so that you can quickly reach out to your customers and stay in touch along the way. So let's get started here. I will share my screen. I'm going to share this guy right here. Here we go. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is start a Zap. We'll pull that up here. And then the next thing I want you to do is actually start a table as well. So this is going to be our data source for our research. And you can do this in a number of ways. But I like to do a table because it allows me some flexibility to make quick changes and bring in data when I need it. When you start your table, we're going to add three fields. We're going to add a company name.
For those in the chat asking, if you wanted to pull something from like an existing database, you don't necessarily have to make the table. That's just the specific use case that Katie has in hers. So if you wanted to integrate with your database, go ahead and like pull up that list or whatever that looks like for you. That is totally fine.
Yep, absolutely. Here we go.
And then for those
And
asking if there's documentation or other information you want the agent to consider, yes, absolutely, you can include that. Just make sure you've got that pulled up so that you can reference it in the agent when we get to that step.
yep, perfect. And I can show that. So we'll kick off our process here. There's a number of different ways you can trigger a Zap, but for this purpose, I like to run it on a schedule because I want to get these updates every week. So that will kick off for us every Monday, bright and early. And here we go. So once that triggers, then I want to go ahead and pull up the information from my table. For you, that could be your Salesforce report, that could be a Google Sheet, wherever you're finding your data. We are going to find records. And the thing we didn't do in here is give companies. Prior to this, I went ahead and I looked up companies that are in the news right now. And according to Google, companies in the news right now include Taco Bell. And for competitor's sake, we're also going to research McDonald's. because I think it's better than Taco Bell. Here we go.
Wait, can we take a
So
second to pause and just walk through again the intended problem that this Zap and process is going to solve? I see a few questions in the chat related to the overall goal here.
yes. So this is meant to solve for doing account research in your book of business. So when you have several companies in your name and you want to be updated if they have recent news, the mergers and acquisitions, new deals, new partnerships, new products, to find that sort of information and surface it really quickly for our sellers every week.
And so for those attendees that might not have this exact use case, that's okay. If you want to customize what you're building, if it doesn't match Katie's exactly, that's okay. And if you just want to build only the agents portion, you can wait until Katie gets to the agent step and just build that portion as well. Agents can be used in a Zap and independently. It just kind of depends on your use case. We've done previous webinars before where we talked exclusively about using agents independently. So for this webinar, we thought it would be interesting to talk about using an agent in a Zap as well. So if you're like, I don't really want to build this in a Zap, that's totally fine. Just wait for the agent step and we can walk through that. And if this isn't an exact use case you have, I think that's okay. You could still build your agent to say like research XYZ company, just so that you get comfortable using the agent, even if this isn't like totally applicable to your exact job.
Thank you, Lena. All right, so let's work on the agent piece of this. So let's go here. We're going to create a new agent and we are just going to start from scratch. I like to start with my trigger, and for this purpose, since I'm running it in a Zap and it will get called in different pieces, I'm going to trigger via Zap. You can also trigger on demand manually. You can trigger it through another process, whatever is going to work for you in your flow. And then we need to give it instructions. So, like Lena said, this is like your robot helper in the background. So, you need to tell it what to do, you need to give it examples, and you need to give it rules. So, for this case, we will write a prompt in here and we are researching our companies. So, I'm going to tell it when you're triggered, you'll receive a list of companies to research. And your job is to find credible news from the last 7 days about these companies. So now it has a task. And then from there, I'm going to give it some ideas of where to start searching. So for each company in the list, search these sites for equivalent. And you can use whatever is going to be relevant for your business. I'll just throw some in here.
So I'm going to clarify some of the questions in the chat here. So Katie's use case specifically is to research specific companies. So like if you're an AE and you're assigned McDonald's and Taco Bell, her agent is meant to research those. So the reason that she set up a table is because a lot of times the AEs are assigned companies that might rotate. So like this year I might be assigned Taco Bell, next year I might be assigned McDonald's. It just depends. You might be pulling those companies from your CRM or a different database. That's okay. You don't need to set up the table the way that Katie did. But if for some reason you were like, I don't want to pull this from a database, you could create a list directly in Zapier's tables product, which can be really helpful. And obviously it integrates into the agent very seamlessly. So if the Zap isn't how you wanted to set this up, now is the time to open your agent and follow along with what Katie is doing. Her trigger calls from the Zap. You could just say, look at this list of companies in my CRM. So your trigger would call to your specific CRM, or that Salesforce or HubSpot, or it could be like a Google Sheet, something like that.
And just to follow on to that, I also find that having this as part of a Zap gives a little bit more control in the agent. You're giving it very specific information, you're giving it very specific steps. And you'll see in here, part of the reason we use a table is because then we're drafting emails and it's a nice housing place for those records as well. So to Lena's point, yes, to each your own, whatever way this is going to work for you, but just general concepts. So what we're going to tell it to do, we've got some sites to look at, and then we're going to say only look for recent and relevant news as a sales outreach trigger. And examples could be product launches, here we go. Okay. And then once you've gathered data, format it. And this is where you can customize a lot too, how you want this output to look. So for me, I want this to go into a Slack message. I want this to be fun and I want it to be kind of silly. We created this in a go-to-market hack week that we had, and part of the goal was to be like slightly unhinged. So I want it to have a lot of emoji. I want it to be funny. If you're sending an update to your C-suite, you probably don't want a lot of emoji. So this is where you can customize and tell it what to do. But for me, I want it to be a Slack message. I want it to be fun. It as a Slack message.
While Katie's typing out the instructions for a Slack message, I just want to go over again, if you're new to agents and you're setting this up from like your CRM. So there's questions asking about like how to get access to the CRM. So Zapier connects with over 7,000 apps. It really depends on what the app allows you to do within Zapier. So when Katie's done writing this, maybe we can go back and show what it looks like to add like a CRM trigger instead, just so folks that are like doing this not from his app can see what that looks like. Also, if you're playing around in your own agent right now, if you see that button on the screen that says add tools, that's where you would select additional tools to use in these steps. You would click the edit trigger button to change that from edit trigger as a Zap to like if it's your CRM or something else. And Katie, would you just search for HubSpot there so people, I saw that as an example. And so you would click on HubSpot and there's a bunch of different triggers. So it just depends on your use case. You could look for new companies. You could use even like the Zapier AP, or sorry, the HubSpot API call. It's pretty flexible. And these are similar triggers. If you've used a Zap before, it's similar triggers to what is in the Zap. So like it could be when a new company is created, you want to find all the research on from all of these places that Katie has listed. It could be something simple like that.
Okay, and then with your agent, you want to give it rules. This is AI, it can go off the rails. So you want to put in some guardrails so it knows what to do. For me, that is, I don't want to return information about companies that don't have news. I don't want it to make things up. And I also don't want it to use asterisks under any circumstances. I've never accomplished telling AI not to do this, but I always try. If you have conquered this battle, please let us know in the chat. Okay, perfect. And then we will go ahead and preview this. So we will test it. It will tell me it doesn't have any information yet because it's going to be waiting from that trigger, but we'll give it one of our accounts. And then it will start to run here. So it'll take a minute, it'll think about it, and you can watch along in the activity here to see what it's doing. It's going to start researching and it'll start following your instructions. We'll see if it can pull something up from us.
So one of the nice things about using an agent, you can let the agent decide. So when you add tools, Kitty, did you add Slack as a tool in here yet?
No, because I format the Slack later in a certain
Okay,
way.
cool. We'll go
Mhm.
through this. So a lot of people are asking like, how do I how do I get access to a specific tool? How do I give the agent access? When we go through the Slack stuff, Katie, I think that would be good to walk through to show people like how you can have the agent decide for you versus like if you wanted to manually tell it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is a good test. What it did is it formatted the information in the way that I want it, in this newsletter style. Taco Bell has a new collab with Frank's Red Hot, which is very exciting if you're a Frank's gal. And then it'll link to that article. So what I'm going to do is go back into my process. Sorry, there's pictures right here. Okay. And then I'm going to complete this step where I want to actually fire the agent. So what I'm doing now is I'm telling it to run in this process. And what do we call this guy? Company News Research Assistant. And then all I'm going to input as the message, because it has its own prompt within the agent, is my list of companies. I'll pause it in the Zap to run to wait for the agent to run. And then its output will be a Slack message.
So for Katie's specific agent, it's going to trigger from the Zap. I do see questions about why we're using an agent within a Zap versus a standalone agent. We can address that in a second. But Katie's agent is triggered from the Zap. So Katie, can you flip back to your agent real quick?
Mhm.
So you can see right at the top, the trigger says trigger via Zap. So when it runs through the agent step in the Zap, it will trigger this. A standalone agent, your trigger is going to look different. You wouldn't trigger it from the Zap. It would be, as an example, like we just went through, it could be like a new company is created in your CRM. If you wanted to do something really custom and you're comfortable with code, or you have an engineer that could help you with the code, you could use like an API call. That's not typically something Katie and I do. So it would just be a native trigger that is available in the system.
And I like to do, you can do a standalone agent. That works great too. For me, for this process, it made sense to be able to layer in some other things and other steps in the process. It also allows me to pivot a little bit more quickly. Instead of editing the agent, I can just edit the steps in my Zap. It's a little bit how my brain works. So welcome inside. So here we go. We will run this. And then this is going to generate this will kick off, actually, this will kick off our agent to run. And if we look at the activity in our agent here, you'll be able to see that it's in progress. And you can actually look at what's going on in here. And you can see what it's doing along the way. Since this is running in a Zap and it's running at 4 in the morning, which is early even for me, you likely wouldn't see this, but it's good to look back sometimes and it helps you troubleshoot, see what's going on if you're not getting the results that you're looking for. And then here are some reasons that I put this into a Zap and not straight everything into the agent. I like to add other stuff. One thing that's important to me is a GIF. And so we add that in here. Um, it could be a GIF, it could be a GIF, whatever you might think it is. And this is going for our sellers. And so I like to make it money related. I like to keep it PG-13 because my mom could be on here. And then we'll test that. And then we will want to draft this Slack message.
So one of the benefits of using an agent is that it can make decisions on your behalf. So I see some questions in here about like, how do I connect like specific fields in the table? Or if you're not using a table, you might be sending a lot of data from your CRM. You might be like, how does the agent know? It can make these decisions for you. Like you can give it instructions, like take this information and analyze it. You don't need to tell, like if you have experience setting up a Zap, you're used to being like, this is the company name, this is the company URL. An agent, you don't have to do that. It just knows how to read the data so it can process that information without you having to spell it out.
Cool. So we'll send that. We've got this all set up, and then you can customize further if you want to. And then we'll test it. And what you'll get is a Slack message that comes through to your sales rep that's just going to outline any news that was found, links to the articles, and then it'll expand out that GIF for you as well. And you could stop here. So you could stop. This could be enough. This could be just a quick newsletter update, Or you can go farther with this. And this is another reason that I do this here in the Zap process, is because it allows me to call separate agents in this process. So what I like to do from here, my ultimate goal in my table is to draft emails. So the newsletter is really nice, but it's not actionable. So I want our sellers to be able to do something with this information. So the next step then is to continue on in here, and I want to run through a loop, and I want this to loop through every company that's on my list to draft an email and then ultimately drop that into the table. So I'm going to set this up to loop from my line items.
Katie,
And
can you explain looping in a little bit more detail? I think some folks maybe have not done looping before.
yeah, looping, that's a great question because it took me a really long time to understand this. Looping is like telling your Zap to do something one at a time or in chunks. So you often don't want it to just dump a ton of information at once into a process because that can cause breaks. So what I'm specifically doing in here as an example is I'm saying I have a list of companies. And if this was a real book of business, like there could be 100 different companies on here. So I don't want to give it all that information at once. I want to say, go through these line items one by one and run this process. In particular, it's going to be for this agent. It could be for many other things if you're running APIs or going into HubSpot or things like that. But for that, that's what this is. So it's just saying, run through these one by one.
While Katie's setting that up, so for those of you that have experience setting up a Zap, if you ever have a situation where you're like, wait, I wanted to actually like run through again and pull additional data, looping is actually a really good step for that type of work. If you've not used looping before, it is not required for this agent. We wanted to show you guys a real life example of how we had to solution a problem. So looping is what is helpful for this specific use case. For your agent, that might not be a necessary step.
I will say if you're putting a ton of information at once into an agent, we did a live build of this with some of our sellers yesterday, and we found that giving the agent 100 different companies at the same time to research, it would look maybe at like 80 of them and then skip 20. So you can finagle with the trigger and say, do this in chunks or however you want to do it. But looping is another good resource to break that down into smaller chunks of information to let it process. So what we're going to do here, I just duplicated that agent and we're going to give it a different prompt. And this time we're going to say, when triggered, you'll receive a newsletter you wrote and a company name. Your job to match that company name to the newsletter information. After you do that, draft an email. So pretty straightforward here, but something with agents that you want to be mindful of is it is helpful to give them separate jobs. So again, this one is an email writer. The other one is a researcher. They don't have the same set of skills. It's similar to me and a lot of people on my team. We don't all have the same skills. So think of your agents as people who you work with. Everyone's got a strength and you want to make sure you've got your strengths in your agent. So here we go. We'll pull this and we're going to run that agent. And we've got a copy here. We're going to pause, and the output is going to be an email draft. And we'll just call it an email draft. And the input message for our email writer is going to be the newsletter that we already got earlier in our steps, and then the company. So you can see here in this first loop through, the company it pulled is McDonald's. So I want it to say McDonald's. I want it to find it in the newsletter, find its own information it's already got, and then write me an email. So that will run. And then from there, all we do is we just find our way back to the table and we match it up into the record there. And this for you, maybe this looks like a HubSpot note, maybe this looks like an update on your CRM record. But for me, that is going to look like my table. So I'm going to find them in here. And I'm going to match to my looping companies. Continue. Test. So then once I've found what I want to update, then I want to actually update it.
So for those that were asking about why we were using a table when you could be pulling this data directly from your CRM, for Katie's use case, she's trying to simplify the process where she's writing back to the table. We'll show you what the table looks like in a second, but this may not be applicable for the way that you're using your use case for agents. But for Katie, this was like a simpler way to condense all the information that needs to be referenced in this one Zap. You definitely don't have to do it this way, but if you've ever built a Zap before and you're like, oh, there's so many pieces of data, I like have to grab it from so many places, putting them in a table, or you could do this with a Google Sheet, putting it in a Google Sheet specifically will make it a little bit easier for you to be like, okay, let me call for this specific column rather than being like, okay, let me find it again in the CRM. And we'll walk you through this when Katie's done testing the table.
Here we go. So we're going to update the email copy. And then I want it to update me on the date that it's updating. Oh, where's our date? That triggered and go. Here we go. When you run a schedule, there is a date that will come through, and we could do this. We could do this. And this way we can, where are we at? Here we go. Then we can add the date that it last updated the information, and then we'll know if there's new news or no news. So that'll go there. And then you can see in here, I think I tested it before I added the date, but you can see in here, then back in your table, we have got the drafted email here. This gives the reps also a format to edit. You can just inline edit in here and save those and then pull it out to Gmail, pull it out to wherever you're going to be sending your emails from. But you've got a drafted copy there ready to go. And that's where we land.
So I just want to pause on this
Yes.
real quick and just make sure that we reiterate that like this is why the table was used in this use case. Katie's got the name of the company and then she's got a column for the email copy. So like I said earlier, if you have multiple pieces of data from your Zap, your agent that you want to reference, in this case, like the name of the company versus the email copy, this is a great way to sort of store that email copy so you can reference it somewhere else. It sometimes is a little frustrating to be like, okay, well, I had, this email summary written somewhere in one of these steps. I got to go find it now. Putting it here just makes it a little bit easier for your agent or your Zap to recall this data. You don't have to do it like this, but it does sort of simplify things because you know all the associated data, like the email copy that is associated specifically with McDonald's is all referenced nice and tidy here.
Oh, that is a wrap on the demo, Lena.
Awesome. All right. We've got a lot of Q&As, and I do think a lot of folks are beginners. So just for context, we do run these build along webinars pretty frequently. And the audience kind of is different depending on the webinar. This is the first time I've seen so many beginners. In the past webinars, we've seen a lot more people that have experience with Zapier as a whole and are just new to agents. So I'm wondering, we have quite a few minutes left. I'm wondering, is it helpful, guys, if I just pulled an audible and we just did a second demo of something that is a little bit more basic? I'm going to see in the chat if people have opinions here. Okay, great. Let me see if I can kind of prep one on the fly. I actually love this use case that Katie is doing. It is something that I'm actually going to copy for a different event later. Let me go ahead and stop sharing the slides. And then I can pull up an agent and see if I have something prepped ready to go. And just for context, I know this was maybe a little bit more advanced for people that are very, very new to Zapier. For context, when we've done these in the past, we typically have people that are very comfortable in Zapier and are just like super brand new to agents. So we did go through a lot of different Zapier products. So I hope that piqued your interest. Let me open one of my existing agents. Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So this is very similar to what Katie was doing. A lot of you asked why we would do a Zap with an agent instead of a standalone agent. As you could see with Katie's steps, she was pulling in a lot of data. So, like as an example, typically when we work with salespeople, my salespeople typically have like hundreds of books in their names. That is a lot of data for the agent to sort through. Katie wanted to give it more specific instructions to sort of pace the process so that we wouldn't sort of have any data issues. The agent could run a little bit faster. Katie was also calling out creating like email copy, and we needed to know which email copy goes with which company. So there were a lot more things that Katie had to do, which putting in a Zap, if you want to be really specific about how the data is associated, putting it in a Zap like that allows you to have more control. An agent itself can make decisions for you and gives you a lot more flexibility. So I'm going to walk through a very, very similar example, but I'm going to run it specifically for myself. And I'm not a real AE, so I just have a test account in our CRM that is assigned to me. So because it's only one company, I don't necessarily need to do all of the steps that Katie did on her side. So it's just like simpler in the agent itself. And the other thing I'm going to walk through is how to set up some of the tools within the agent itself. Okay, so you can see in my screen here that these are the instructions where I'm saying the first part is to retrieve companies where the company owner is me from our CRM. I want to include a bunch of product data. So like if they have free accounts, if they have paid accounts, if they have any existing opportunities open in the last 3 months, if there's any meetings open. You can tailor all of this to what makes sense for you. These are just the things that were important to me. My trigger here is on demand. For the demo that I did for this agent, I was just running it on the demand. In Katie's example, she was doing it triggered, so it could run every Monday. Or you could do from HubSpot. You could do like when a new company is created. It just kind of depends. And so for my example, I'm just going to do on demand. And then for each account, so I know because I've tested this before, I'm only assigned to one account in our CRM because again, I am not an AE. It's just a test account that is assigned to me. But for each account, we would want to search the web for recent news, press releases, funding announcement, yada, yada. You'll notice that in Katie's demo, she gave it specific examples of like websites she thought would be good. This is a good example of where it's like, if you're not sure, you can just give the agent examples of what you want, and the agent can make those decisions for you. And then I'm going to have it just sort of gather and compile the information. I'm going to have it analyze all the data it's found, both from the CRM and from the internet, and create a summary. So I gave it these specifics. You could give it something different. You could actually maybe test not giving it a detail and see how it decides to format the summary. So now for those of you that were asking specifically about, well, how do I make sure that the agent has access to stuff? So when you add a tool here, it will prompt you to figure out how to set it up. So if you have a HubSpot account, you're going to connect your account. You can, and then notice how all of these say, let the agent decide. The agent is smart enough to figure out what fields should go where. I haven't told the agent to do anything. I just set up, hey, this is the account you need to use because this is the account where I have permissions. The agent is literally deciding everything else. If you've used Zapier before and you set up permissions, you do have to tell the agent, this is the URL you need to call. This is the field you need to call. But the agent can make decisions on its own, unlike a Zap. Okay. So then we're going to format this into a Slack message. Katie, I don't know if you have this issue. I just can't seem to format Slack messages well. Whenever I do a Slack message step in a Zap, I just like mess up the formatting, the code for it, and it always looks so weird. So in all of my agents, I don't tell it how to structure the Slack message. I just let it do it for me.
That is good to tell it to just do it well. I like give it a format of like, this is how I want the information paced out, and that tends to work sometimes.
I would say, like, if this wasn't just like a demo that I had prepped, if this was for real, I would probably give it more structure because you wouldn't want to be sending like a repeatable message over and over that like is structured differently each time. But just for the sake of the demo, like I'm just someone that struggles with the Slack step for whatever reason in a Zap. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to tell it. It can just decide for me. And then it'll post the message. So let me just click the preview button and show you what this looks like. Scroll all the way down. We're going to do test the agent again. You can see I had already tested it before. And then for the group, you can connect to any CRM that Zapier has access to. We have over I think it's actually 8,000 apps now. So if you don't use HubSpot, it's not a big deal. You can definitely use something else. Okay, so when you're testing with the agent, it's going to talk to you and be like, here's a preview. How does it look? Okay, I don't read code. I don't know what this means. I'm just going to say approve. And then it's going to move on to the next step that I gave it. And it will tell you if it's struggling with any of the steps. I gave it access both to our CRM and to our HubSpot API access request. You can see in this step, I just connected the account. I didn't tell it to do anything else. So it's figuring this out all on its own. Whereas in a Zap, if it was struggling with the step, you would have to go in and manually fix it and figure out what isn't working. Okay, while I'm waiting for this to run, maybe we can walk through some more questions. Um, yes, we can definitely send over some zaps in a template, and templates after the event. Quick wins for agents. We do have a ton of templates for agents that we can send along. Katie, do you have any quick agents that you've used that are like beginner friendly?
Um, yeah, I've got some that are just like very easy prompts. Like, candidly, I think as a beginner, I started just building things for myself, and just playing around. So I would recommend too, I've seen in the chat a little bit, like it's hard to get started, but just testing it, and you can test it for yourself as like a safe space. You get a weird email, you get a weird email, who cares? So I'd recommend that, but let me see if I can pull up some agents that I can share.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so my agent is taking a bit to run, which can happen. While it's running, I'm just going to scroll. I've tested this before just so that I can show you what it looks like. Let's go under activities. Oh, it may not show my previous run. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so it's still trying to run this step. One thing while we're waiting for this to run that I can show you is using Copilot. Have you all ever tried Copilot before, whether it was in a Zap or an agent? Okay. So for those that have not tried Copilot, Copilot is also sort of a native language situation where you can tell it what you want to do. You can chat with your Copilot. So I actually created this using Copilot. I said like, you can just tell it like, please help me with research on companies I own. I've never done this while this app is running, so let's just see what happens. And it'll give you feedback on how to set up all of these steps that we listed. So you can see how the Copilot is like thinking. And so it'll give you feedback on like what you can include in your workflow. And then you can keep chatting with it if like you're not sure about how to set up these specific steps. You can keep chatting with your Copilot and it will help you figure out how to write all of this. And again, it's like natural language. So just talk to it like you were talking to a person, and Copilot can help you figure all of that out. Okay, so now it's finished doing the search. We're just going to click approve and let it run. And sorry if this takes a while, guys. We're doing this kind of on the fly. Okay, while it's running, I'm going to try to answer a couple more questions. Um, Yes, we do have specific templates for RevOps that will be included in the templates link that we send out after the event. And I think Liam might have dropped the link already in the chat. Katie, still see some questions here about tables. I'm wondering if you can walk through how you thought about setting up your table and like how you knew that you needed that specific setup.
Yeah, I knew one, I needed a place for the process to pull information from. It makes sense in my process to have a table instead of just pulling straight from HubSpot. It's a little bit easier to customize, especially for a sales rep. If I want to add different companies in there, other information, I can just add that into a table. Um, and then I knew the end result that I wanted to get to was a place where reps could access the emails. I found that we can like Slack things to reps, or we can send them in other ways. But a lot of times that's like a point in time of information, and it's not super helpful. If you've ever tried to search through your Slacks for that one message you got a while ago, that's really hard. So keeping it in the table is a good source to have all the data in one place. So I knew that I needed a place to start from and a place to land. And I wanted to have a resource that would be evergreen, it would be continuously updated, and something that reps could come back to at their leisure when they're ready to actually send an email and not have to worry about tracking things down at a later time.
Awesome. Okay, so you can see my agent is running. It keeps asking for like, here's a preview. Does it look good? While you're testing with the agent, it's going to ask for your approval. If it didn't look good, you could say like, no, try, whatever XYZ instructions. But this does look good to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and click approve. When your agent runs for real, it's not going to ask you these things. It's just because I'm testing it. So it's looking for feedback to make sure that it's running correctly. Okay, so we've reached the step where it's searching for all of these things in step 5. So it's just going to continue to run. It might ask me to approve something. So while it's doing that, I'm going to go back into the chat, into the questions, and just make sure we can get to as many of these as possible. Um, all right, I think we're still seeing some looping questions. Katie, do you mind just explaining what the looping step is again?
Yes. So in this case, the looping step is put in place to say, I have a long list of company names and I want to send this to my agent step by step. I don't want to send all of them at once. I want to get one result at one time. So literally what it's doing is it's saying, here's my long list of companies and start at the top, run through them all. So it sends first Taco Bell, sends it to the agent, finds the table, drops the email. Then it'll send McDonald's, send it to the agent, get the email, drop it in the table. So it's a way to pace the data load and send it through at a slower rate. So you're not dumping everything in at once and you're getting one specific result every time as well, instead of getting a ton of results and then having to break them apart later.
Yeah. Makes sense. And for all the folks that are really, really new to agents, or maybe even super, super new to Zapier, one of my pieces of advice is to start with sort of productivity zaps, and then you can expand to productivity agents as well. You don't necessarily have to start with a zap. You can start with an agent. There's no right way to do this. And the reason I say productivity helps is because you can set up zaps or agents to sort of like organize your calendar or to summarize a Slack channel at the end of the day, something like that, right? And that doesn't really affect, like Katie said, that examples like that, if it shows up weird, it's only weird to you. You're not sending this out to the world. You're not sending this out to the team. And the productivity hacks, once you start using them, it can get really interesting for yourself to be like, okay, where do I waste time searching for things? Or do I waste time writing summaries? Katie, do you have a productivity zap or agent example that you find helpful?
Yeah. Do you want to hear a silly one? I find we live in Montana and I feel like I'm always behind on knowing when events are coming up, and agents are really good at searching the internet for certain things. So I have one that searches the internet for me every week to see if concerts are coming up in my area. And it's very good at finding what might be happening in the next couple of weeks and sending that over to me. Um, Another one that I like to use for productivity is taking Slack messages and then formatting those into tickets for myself if we want a work related opportunity. I get a lot of messages, and some things I just need to come back to later because I can't do it right now, but I will again lose it in my Slack. So I like to use Zap or an agent to be able to just format that into a ticket stored for later. I don't have to worry about it right now.
And we can send in the post event wrap up, we do have an agent template that is specifically designed to sort of organize and format your calendar for the week. So, like, if you're somebody that has like a lot of random meetings and you want to format those in a way where you have focus time, we do have an agent template for that. So, we can make sure to call that out in the post event email. Okay, so my agent has finished running. And so you can see here is the summary that it is giving me. This is what was delivered. And actually, I can see this was sent to our testing channel. I'm going to pull that up shortly and just share it so you can see it. But it gives you a summary of what it did and what was delivered. If you guys give me 1 second, I can see if I can pull up the actual Slack message that was sent in our testing channel. Okay, let me just share. Okay, this is the summary it delivered. So, like I said, I did not give it any rules for formatting. This is quite long. If you were doing this for real and not just for a demo, you probably would want to consolidate this in some way. You might want it to tell it to format it slightly differently so it's more readable, things like that. But it gave an overview of the company, recent developments from that it found on the internet, opportunities for if I was an AE, opportunities for sales growth, and then our competitive positioning, key personas to target, and any considerations. So this could be really helpful if you're an AE or if you're someone that does a lot of customer facing calls to kind of have this prep for you before you actually go ahead and do those meetings. All right, let me stop sharing. All right, we are getting to the end of time. I think we did get through the bulk of the questions, which is great. Glad we could answer a lot of those for you. So I just want to reiterate a few things. So we do have a ton of templates. Leah already dropped this template into the chat, but we will make sure to include it in the post event email as well. And then for those of you that are looking better to understand how to use AI, we do have a specific use case booklet that we can share. This is specifically for HR workflows in agent work cases, use cases. I mentioned our colleague Emily maybe at the beginning. She is on our people team. So a lot of these will resonate with her as well. And we will also make sure to share this link in the post-event follow-up. We did go through most of the questions. Really appreciate everyone jumping in the chat and giving us feedback on where to direct today's webinar. And thank you all so much for attending. Katie, thank you for walking through so many Zapier elements. I think our audience got to learn about a lot of our products today, and I hope that was very interesting, especially for beginners if you maybe haven't tried them out before. I hope that was like a good way to spark your imagination.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. We'll see you later.